So Artxx sent me this box of acrylic markers to review. They will review this video before I publish it, but I did tell them that I'm gonna give you guys my honest review. Thank you Artxx for these markers. Although I have way too many art materials already, I'm curious to see how these would perform because I have never used acrylic markers in my drawings before. My daughter has a set of acrylic markers, so she's eyeing this one and perhaps she would want to use them after I review this. Many people has reviewed this already. My friend Pakar, or you know him as Teo, has reviewed this on his blog and it covers quite a few things already. So I'm going to review this in another way. I'm going to show you how I would learn to use an art tool or art medium that I have never used before. When trying something new, I try not to have any expectations and I try not to force these markers to perform like something that I already like to use. Like for example, some other ink marker or brush pen or fountain pen. I'm just gonna test it out and see how I can adapt to how these markers need to be used so that they perform the best that they're designed to perform. And then I would see how it would fit in with how I normally draw and what I like to draw. Sound good to you? Let's just see what's inside. Wow, look at that. Lots of bright colors, something that I'm gonna have to get used to because I do tend to like duller colors. As you can see, I just veered towards the more duller colors, but I'm gonna try all of them. So it says that the brush tip is 1 to 6 mm. So I guess it goes from very thin to as thick as 6 mm. Okay, so it says shake well before use. Remove the cover of top valve, guess that's this. And press the valve 4 to 5 times. I'm glad the instructions are short. I don't really like following instructions. There's nothing yet. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's coming out. Okay, and don't shake it at this point. Okay, here's a small test. Wow, so it does cover over these lines. How am I going to test these markers? As an illustrator, I draw in all kinds of styles, from really simple, cartoony to something a bit more graphic. The other side of the spectrum would be something very realistic. So I'm going to try something cartoony, something graphic, and something more realistic. My kids like reading this Mr. Tickle book. They like being tickled. The drawings look simple, so I'm going to try drawing Mr. Tickle in this style. This looks like natural media. The artist uses flat colors and bold black outlines. It looks like he probably used a marker here. I thought maybe I'll come up with my own Mr. Tickle scene, but I noticed that his compositions are actually deceptively simple. So I think I'm just going to draw one of his scenes as a study. So I've done the penciling. I think more or less it looks like this picture. Pretty interesting composition actually. And I'm going to use the acrylic markers to paint over this. I believe the markers are opaque, so I believe that they would cover over these pencil lines. I'm not sure which green to use, and they aren't exactly the exact shade. I wonder whether they can actually blend. Guess kind of. I guess while wet, I should be able to blend. This looks kind of close to this. Alright, I'm just gonna dive right in. Pretty happy with what I was able to achieve. I found that the blending did take a bit of work with these markers. Assuming that he used ink or just liquid paint, it would be easy to just mix the whole batch in this exact color already. But for this one, I had to keep going back and forth in small batches before it dried. So I'm not really sure yet whether these markers are intended to be blended as I painted. Achieving this more desaturated color, I might have to experiment a bit more with the mixing, perhaps adding a bit more brown or something. I don't know whether it'll be too complex mixing 3 colors at the same time, because mixing 2 colors already was a bit of a handful. These lines could have been a non-flexible marker tip, which allows for just minimal variation in line. But these markers have very flexible tips, so I had to really control the pressure and more or less keep it consistent so that I could achieve a less variable line width. Trying to blend or mix the colors with these markers tend to produce a lot of textures. I wouldn't say that this is better than this, because these textures could be nice, seen on its own, and flat colors can be nice also. But it looks like with these markers, if I wanted something very flat and consistent looking, I would just have to pick one closest color, and I might not get the exact color I want, so it would be whatever color that's available. Or I could try maybe Impressionism, where single color gives more or less a flat thing, and if I want to blend color, maybe it's just more like adding these little dots, and perhaps that would be an interesting way to blend the colors. Okay, let's see if I can do a more graphic style now. Perhaps I'll just do something spontaneous, and perhaps I'm not going to blend so much. I'm just going to try to just use the colors available to me. Looking at these few drawings I've done here, drawing a comic panel roughly this size, it's kind of okay, except that I wish that the thinnest line I could go were a bit thinner. The thinnest these markers can go, as stated, is 1 mm. So if I were to use these markers for a comic, I'll probably pair it with a thinner pen, unless I was drawing much bigger. Because I couldn't mix the colors beforehand, and I had to kind of mix them on the paper, there's this unevenness in terms of color, like this part is a bit more reddish, this part's a bit more yellowish, and the edges here, there's a bit of yellow tinge here. And I think this makes this picture a lot more interesting to look at. I feel that it makes it more complex looking. I like that the markers were opaque enough that I could go back and forth between light colors and dark colors. I didn't have to go from light to dark, so I could put these words over everything without any problems. You saw me do light colors first, and then I covered everything over with my final colors. So in a way, my penciling was the light colors. The opacity of these markers allowed me to do that, which is pretty nice. For this one, I started with black outlines, and just like how I would do some of my acrylic drawings, I'll add the colors after I do my black lines. It would cover over the black areas just a bit, and then I would do another black layer, touching up all the black areas that I didn't want to be covered up. And it seems to work just like how I would use acrylics. So this technique works with these markers too. Here I was trying a bit of the Impressionism thing. Hopefully I'm using the right terms. Kind of mixing colors by adding dots of other colors over one color. This is kind of new to me, but I think it's kind of interesting. I might continue exploring this technique. Again, I like how uneven the mixture of these colors came out. Like, I like this turquoisey yellow that I was able to achieve, and it came about by just mixing on paper and dragging the paint around. So although I can't mix the colors separately, it's kind of nice mixing it on paper and achieving these unplanned results. I'm just going to try one more where I'm going to paint over this to see if I can paint over, for example, an old drawing that I didn't like. So I did this drawing loosely based on this photo that I shot. I'm pretty pleased with how the acrylic markers could cover over the layer behind. Sometimes I did need to pump it a bit more, but it does work with this valve action. So I think once the paint runs out, you do have to pump it. So pumping it to get more paint is totally part of how this marker works. And the more paint, the more coverage I can do. And just like acrylic, I noticed that I had to paint over about 2 times and sometimes 3 times before I can really cover over the bottom layer. You can see that I covered over darker layers with white, and the white I needed to go over a few times. I do like the fact that I need to cover over kind of 2 or 3 times because it allows me to see a bit of the paint behind. And I like to do that on purpose because it gives the color more variation, it provides more texture, it just makes the painting look more interesting. So it's pretty much in line with how I would use acrylics. It's just that I have these in these portable cylinders that I can carry around. So I've tried the basic style, the more graphic styles. Now I'm going to try to do a more realistic style. I'm going to try to draw this bottle of ink here. So this is my attempt at a still life, and yeah, I think these markers can be useful for a more realistic drawing. You could see that I was trying to figure out the blending part. I ended up using my fingers, and for me that worked. Maybe there are other ways to blend it. I might discover that later on, maybe using a wet brush or something, I'm not sure. But using my fingers is what I do when I use real acrylic paints anyway, so it works for me. Now I'm going to test out using it for urban sketching, just bringing these markers around my neighborhood. To keep it portable, I'm just going to bring just a few, so I got to narrow it down. I like mixed media, so I'm going to bring color pencils, charcoal, and a gel pen for thinner lines. I blocked in the colors first with the markers, and then I worked on the finer details with a color pencil. I like this mixed media approach because it gives me more varied texture. Like I can rub here and the rough lines here. It contrasts against the smoother acrylic paint. And I was enjoying how I could easily cover over things, whether it be lines or some other detail, which is one of the advantages of acrylic paints. And when it covers over, it does not drag the bottom layer because it dries permanently. So this is my honest review for these markers. I like how they perform. I like the consistency of the paint that comes out of these markers. And I can see how I would easily bring these out in my day-to-day sketching. Before this review, I have only seen kids use these markers, and they tend to be very bright and sometimes gaudy looking. So I was quite surprised that these markers could actually do more muted drawings like how I like to do if I wanted to. The only drawback is that these caps can come off very easily, so I hope that I don't lose them when I bring them out. From the drawings I've done with these markers, perhaps you can see how they would fit in with your own style of drawing, and you can decide if these will be useful to you. So this is how I would test out a new art tool. My daughter has been eyeing these markers, so it's time to hand it over to her. I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.